What's going on, guys? Ranked Gaming here, and welcome back to the video. Of course, this is a Tuesday, which does usually mean an episode of Tank Tuesday, but I kind of feel we've got to the end of what is going to be super helpful when learning about tanks. So for the most part, I'm going to stop that series now, but I say for the most part because if something comes out at a later date for Battlefield, or I suddenly get an idea to do something, I will go back and cover that, and try and keep this somewhat linear as opposed to constantly being the same series over and over again. So for the next couple of weeks we will have a new series basically called Flying Ace. This isn't a serious name, but this is more about the same thing as Tank Tuesday except with planes. Now planes actually have quite a large impact in Battlefield 1, I'd argue the most impact out of any Battlefield game. Obviously helicopters are now out of the game, so helicopters before I think were that number one flying sort of asset to a team, and planes have now kind of merged with the helicopter in a way. They're now slower and have more effect on the ground as opposed to usual jets which are too fast to hit anyone on the ground. So I'll try and go up and give you the best tips and ideas of what different planes do in Battlefield 1. And for this first week we have the fighter plane. Now the fighter plane was basically, originally a small wooden airplane which is basically designed for reconnaissance. You fly it over the enemy trench line, look down, and basically mark out where they have their guns, if you can see large movements of troops, their trench line if it's moved forwards, back maybe, and they've built new trenches at all, or if it's in the same place as it was before. But eventually people started to get ideas of, okay, if I get in the right position I can drop things out the side of my plane and actually kill somebody. So they began to drop things like darts, bricks, sandbags, and of course eventually when they had them, things like bombs as well. But that wouldn't really come into play a lot because they wouldn't invent bombs until they invented the bomber. So of course from this idea of dropping things out the side of a plane is where they got the idea for bombers. Now bombers basically then took over the aspect of reconnaissance and just dropping things in the enemy. So the fighter plane became more as the anti-bomber. This had to mount machine guns on the front of the airplanes, and of course if you looked at anything of World War I airplanes you'll know that the first ones actually tore straight through the propellers of the planes because they couldn't match up the rate of fire of the gun with the propeller. So a whole mechanism was invented where the gun would only shoot when the propeller was out of distance and wouldn't actually be torn up, and it's an extremely advanced and pretty clever system. Sadly there isn't really anything like this in Battlefield. I haven't done it in slow motion to find out, I'm not sure you can go that slow in Battlefield 1, but it just shoots randomly, and although it's not really a problem, the refire rate usually would be pretty odd. If the gun was trying to avoid the propeller, while in Battlefield 1 it's constant, and it's not a shame, but it'd be kind of cool to see that much detail. So of course then from this invention of the new fighter plane they began making new weapons for these planes, developing faster and stronger planes, making overall the fighter a more valuable asset. Now in Battlefield 1 the fighter plane is designed for dogfighting primarily, that is its number one role. Mainly its idea is to take out other planes, take out the bomber, take out the attack planes, although it can easily be taken out by both of those if you're not careful. It can still have an effect on the ground, but it's extremely hard to do, and rarely you ever find somebody who says, I prefer using the fighter plane to taking out enemies on the ground. It's really not what it's designed for. Now the fighter plane only has one seat, but it does have three variants, like all the other planes, like all the other tanks, and like a lot of guns in Battlefield 1. Now there is some distinction between these different variants, not massively, but there's definitely enough to make them unique in their own right. So the first one that you get pre-unlocked for you is the Dogfighter. This one has twin heavy machine guns with an emergency repair, and this is really the standard one. It literally only has twin heavy machine guns and emergency repair. That is it. This one is basically designed for, you want to fight a fighter plane? Go up and use this version if you have none of the others. You're not going to do a huge amount with this one, but at the same time you're not going to be sat there thinking I'm absolutely useless in this plane. If you can fly it and use it effectively, you can use it effectively, be an asset to the team. Now the second one is the Bomber Killer. This one actually is quite interesting. It has twin TUF heavy machine guns. Now TUF stands for Tank und Flieger in German. Now this basically is a big bullet. It's basically looks like what we call a 50 caliber these days. It's meant to be a sort of anti-tank, anti-airplane sort of shell. Eventually they realised that it's not really big enough to go through a tank or really effective enough to go through a tank, so we'll just use it for airplanes instead. It's obviously more effective than a dogfighter's heavy machine guns, but it does fire slower and actually has more bullet drop, obviously because it's a much bigger round. The Bomber Killer also comes with 6 explosive rockets, which are really good for taking out the bomber. If you can line it up perfectly and put all 6 of them towards the bomber, I believe 3 will actually kill the bomber and take it out. So if you can get these things on target, they are extremely effective, but they are pretty hard to aim. You can also use these to take out enemies in the trench, although it's not really advised because you have to fly straight down the trench and hit them, and obviously if you do it from a distance it's hard to hit somebody because of the accuracy, along with the fact they can easily move, so unless they're stationary in one place or unless you get a lucky shot, you're not really going to kill anyone using these things for the trench. Now obviously this thing is much better than the Dogfighter for taking out air targets, but for the ground it is somewhat limited. Of course, again, it does have the 6 explosive rockets, but they are extremely hard to use on the ground unless you're a well-adapted pilot. And of course then, to balance it out, the TUF heavy machine guns fire a lot slower than the standard heavy machine guns. Of course, again, the bullet drop is lower, like I said. It's basically somewhat the balancing aspect. I'm not really sure if it's enough balance though, because these things are still extremely powerful, but in some way it could be seen as, if you can use them right, they're always going to be effective. Another final variant is the Trench Fighter variant. Now this one again has twin heavy machine guns with explosive darts. So there you go, I was talking about darts earlier and now they come into the video. These things are basically dropped on top of the enemy infantry. Will do a little bit of damage if they hit just to the side of somebody, because obviously they're explosive, but if you hit somebody directly on, you're going to get a one-hit kill. These things are pretty damn powerful. But even then, there's better bombers than this one. So if you're going to use a fighter plane, which is sure it's faster than all the others, why would you not choose to use the bomber or the attack plane, which are bigger bombing craft than the fighter? It's kind of stupid because you want the fighter to be better at air-to-air, as opposed to taking out infantry targets. So again, if you can get more people on one plane, if you can get more bombs, more powerful bombs on one plane, why would you use the Trench Fighter variant as opposed to one of those? The only reason I can see for this is because this thing is still somewhat effective in air-to-air, but at the same time you have 3 machine guns on the bomber, 1 secondary gunner on the attack plane, along with the attack plane pilot having his own guns. So again, this thing is kind of ineffective, especially if you're using it exclusively for doing bombings, because it is nowhere near as effective as the attack or the bomber planes. Now both the Bomber Killer and the Trench Fighter can fly extremely fast using their boost. This does mean, however, they can't repair quickly, which is somewhat of a downset, because there's so many AA guns in Battlefield 1. You get hit by one, you definitely want to repair, and occasionally you don't want to have to do the whole thing of flying extremely slow to repair, because that still makes you a pretty easy target to hit. But even then, this thing is actually very helpful because it can get you straight away from the combat and just fly wherever else and entirely avoid those guns overall. So regardless what plane you choose to use, all of them pretty good, and to be honest, I'm not even the best pilot myself. Most of this gameplay is probably pretty bad, but hopefully you did enjoy the video. Like, subscribe, Rank Up Gaming, out.